You know that moment when grief and faith collide? When everything you thought you believed runs headfirst into the reality of what you've lost. It happens in hospital waiting rooms when the doctor's face tells the story before the words come. It happens at kitchen tables where the divorce papers arrive or the job offer falls through. It happens in the quiet hours when you lie awake wondering why prayers that you prayed with such certainty seem to have gone unanswered. In those moments, we discover what our faith is actually made of. The beliefs that we might recite on Sunday morning suddenly feel different when Tuesday afternoon delivers news that we never wanted to hear. We might find ourselves caught between what we've always said that we believe and what we feel in our bones, which might be abandonment, confusion, and that haunting question, where were you, God? This is not always a comfortable place to be, not a comfortable place to stand, but it may be the most honest place, because faith that has never wrestled with disappointment is faith that's never really been tested. And faith that emerges from that wrestling, still fragile, still questioning, but still reaching towards God, that might just be the most authentic faith there is. Today in the scriptures, we meet two sisters who stood exactly in this place. Their brother had died. Their friend Jesus had arrived too late. And in the space between their grief and their hope, everything was about to change for them. Their encounter with Jesus is the first of several that we'll explore during this season leading to Easter. This Lent, we're beginning a journey called Witnesses, encountering Jesus when it matters most. And over the coming weeks, we'll meet ordinary people who came face to face with Jesus during the most critical hours of his ministry, and in some cases, of their lives. From Martha's grief-stricken faith to Peter's fearful denial, from Pilate's political calculations to Mary's Easter morning recognition. Their stories invite us to examine our own responses when following Jesus becomes difficult, when faith costs us something, and when resurrection hope seems impossible. We begin today with the story of two sisters and a dead brother, and the question that Jesus asks that changes things for them. Now, before we go to Bethany, though, I want to show you what that kind of moment looks like for someone who spent his life explaining faith to other people. You may be familiar with the Christian thinker and author C.S. Lewis. He wrote The Problem of Pain and Mere Christianity, books that have guided millions through intellectual doubts about God. Lewis spent decades explaining the Christian faith to skeptics, answering hard questions with clarity and conviction. And then his wife, Joy, died of cancer. Now, in the journal that he kept afterward, which was later published as A Grief Observed, Lewis wrote that when he returned to God in desperation, when all others had gone, he found a door slammed in your face. The man who explained suffering to others found that his own explanations felt hollow when grief arrived at his own door. But Lewis didn't stop writing. He didn't walk away. Page after page, his journal traces the movement from that slammed door to something harder to name, a faith that maybe had lost some of its polish, but found its footing. Not answers exactly, but presence. The God who had seemed absent slowly became real again, though different from before. Lewis discovered what Martha would discover at her brother's tomb. The faith that we have before grief is not the same as the faith that emerges through it. The choice isn't whether to feel certain, The choice is to whether we keep reaching for God. And that's exactly where Martha stood when Jesus finally arrived in Bethany 4 days too late. Now, the decision moment in this text is unmistakable. After declaring, "I am the resurrection and the life," Jesus looks directly at Martha and asks, "Do you believe this?" It's one of the most direct questions that Jesus poses anywhere in the Gospels, and he asks it not in a moment of triumph, but in the midst of grief, disappointment, and confusion. Notice what's at stake for Martha here. Her brother has died. Jesus could have prevented it and did not. Every reason to walk away from faith is present in this moment. She could have responded with bitterness, with theological hedging, or with polite religious language that really commits to nothing. Instead, she makes a confession that goes beyond what Jesus even asked. "Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world." This is faith choosing to trust before understanding arrives. You see, Martha doesn't know Lazarus will walk out of the tomb in a few minutes. She makes her declaration while her brother is still dead, while her questions remain unanswered, while nothing has changed except that Jesus has asked her to decide. Now, the text presents the choice explicitly through Jesus' question, but it also presents implicitly through the structure of the narrative, the way that this is written. Both sisters say the same words, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." The honest lament is identical. But Martha's encounter includes this pivotal question that forces a response. Now, this pattern echoes other biblical decision moments. Joshua's challenge to Israel, "Choose this day whom you will serve." Ruth's commitment to Naomi, Peter's confession when Jesus asks him point blank, "Who do you say that I am?" In each case, faith emerges not from certainty, but from a choice. Scripture consistently presents faith as both a gift and a response. God's initiative creating space for human decision. But how does a person make that kind of choice, trusting before understanding arrives? Now, John Wesley understood that authentic faith must move from the head to the heart. His own spiritual journey included years of religious practice before that famous night at Aldersgate Street. You see, in London on that night, there was a small group Bible study when he experienced his heart as strangely warmed, and his faith became personal and real in a way that it wasn't before. Martha's confession reflects this same movement from a theological head knowledge, "I know he will rise in the resurrection on the last day," to a personal trust, "I believe that you are the Messiah." Now, our Methodist understanding names this journey through 3 expressions of grace. Prevenient grace was already at work in Martha's life long before this particular moment, drawing her toward Jesus, preparing her heart. Justifying grace meets her in this moment of decision as she says yes to Jesus' invitation. And sanctifying grace would continue to shape her faith in the days and years ahead. Now, our Wesleyan tradition honors both dramatic conversions and gradual awakenings when it comes to our faith. What matters is not the intensity of the moment, but the authenticity of the response. Martha's faith has been forged in grief, and it shows us that saying yes to Jesus often happens not despite our struggles, but right in the middle of them. Jesus' question to Martha, "Do you believe this?" still echoes for us today. Now, maybe some of us have attended church for years without ever personally answering Jesus' question. Maybe we've learned the songs, we've absorbed the stories, we've shown up on Sundays. But there's a difference between knowing about Jesus and trusting him with our lives. The move from spectator to participant often happens in moments like Martha's, when life falls apart and we discover that cultural Christianity isn't enough to hold us. If you've been circling the edges of faith, Jesus is asking you directly, do you believe this? Not do you understand everything, just will you trust me? Perhaps others have walked away from the church at some time in their lives. Maybe the church hurt you at some time. Maybe doubts piled up. Maybe life just got busy and faith quietly faded away. Martha's story offers hope for you. You can come to Jesus with disappointment and accusation on your lips and still find him ready to meet you. Coming back isn't starting over, it's coming home. The door never closed. If you've been distant, today might be the day that you answer Jesus' question again. And maybe you find yourself in a place of already following Jesus. In that case, it might invite you further in. What are you still holding back? What area of your life have you protected from God's claim? Martha moved from a general belief in resurrection to personal trust in Jesus himself. Comfortable faith becomes transformative discipleship when we stop hedging our bets and let Jesus have access to everything, our grief, our doubts, our unanswered questions, and the whole of our lives. The good news is that Jesus meets us in our grief, not after it. He doesn't wait for us to clean up our doubts or compose ourselves before approaching. He walks straight into the middle of our disappointment and asks his question right there. Do you believe this? Notice that Jesus doesn't require Martha to stop grieving before she could respond in faith. He didn't ask her to pretend that everything was okay, or to have all her questions answered. He met her exactly where she was, angry, confused, heartbroken, and invited her to trust him anyway. Her faith didn't erase her pain. It held her pain and her hope together in the same breath. This is how grace works. God has been pursuing you long before this moment, preparing your heart through experiences that maybe you didn't even recognize as God's invitation. Your yes to Jesus isn't the beginning of God's love for you. It's your response to a love that has been reaching toward you all along. And here's the part that can change things. The same Jesus who called Lazarus out of the tomb is calling you, not to a faith that requires perfection, not to a commitment that you have to maintain through sheer willpower, but to a relationship where grace meets you in every decision, every doubt, every day. The voice that commanded death to release its grip speaks the same words over your life. Come out. Be free. So how do we respond to that kind of invitation? How do we practice this kind of honest, reaching faith that Martha showed us? Well, as United Methodists, we make 5 promises when we join the church to support the church with our prayers, our presence, our gifts, our service, and our witness. And this week I want to invite you to consider our prayers, talking with God, and building a real relationship through honest conversation. Martha shows us that faith doesn't require polished words or perfect certainty. She brought her grief, her disappointment, even her accusation directly to Jesus. And that raw honesty became the foundation where her faith deepened. Here are some ways that you might live this out this week. Bring your honest questions to God. Maybe in the next few days you name a specific disappointment or a doubt that you've been carrying silently. Maybe you speak it out loud in prayer. God can handle your real feelings. Maybe you take a moment to write it down. Lewis processed his grief by journaling, raw, unfiltered, honest. Maybe this week try writing to God when prayer feels impossible. Put that slammed door moment on paper. Sometimes faith finds its footing one sentence at a time. Maybe you take time to answer Jesus' question. Before next Sunday, write down your response to, do you believe this? Not what you think you should say, but what's actually true right now. Maybe you consider joining a group for accountability and for growth and encouragement as you practice honest faith with others, or pick up a devotional guide to lead you through this journey toward Easter. We began a few moments ago in a hospital waiting room and around kitchen tables, those moments when grief and faith collide. Martha stood exactly in that place, her brother dead, her questions unanswered. And there, before anything changed, she chose to trust. Jesus still asks his question, do you believe this? And your answer, however fragile, is enough. Jesus meets you right there. Will you pray with me? God of resurrection, we reach toward you with fragile faith and honest doubt. Strengthen our yes when understanding hasn't arrived yet. Through Christ, who calls us to life. Amen.